with our international affairs editor, that is Lilian Odera, and she was also giving us what this means for the region. And we'll also be engaging with Kennedy Mureithi, who will be joining us shortly, who is the foreign affairs editor. But we'll now want to bring you that quick interview. The Tanzania President, John Pombe Magufuli, has packed a lot of international attention. And we are now joined by our international affairs editor, Lilian Odera, to just give us some perspectives on what this means for the region. Thank you, Lilian, for joining us. Lilian, of course, the international community is having a keen interest in what's happening right now in East Africa. And what does this mean for the region by the exit of the Tanzanian president?
Abby, the speculation has been there. You know, here in the newsroom, we've been working our sources the whole week, more than a week, trying to verify this information that has been out there in form of rumors that President John Pombe Magufuli had succumbed to COVID. That was the initial rumor. So the rest of the week, I think we in the newsroom had our news sources on the radar on this story. But yesterday, the final confirmation came just at about 11 p.m. Through the Tanzania Broadcasting Corporation, when we began monitoring and receiving the formal confirmation from the Tanzanian government that President Magufuli had indeed died. I do not know whether we want to say that we were entirely shocked. Of course, rumors are rumors, and death, of course, in these societies in Africa is something that you rarely want to talk about. But I think most newsrooms were prepared, sort of prepared that this might come. It was a delayed, the confirmation only helped us kick in the adrenaline to dig further what could have happened. So that's where we are. But of course, the whole region right now is in mourning. We have had reactions from President Uhuru Kenyatta, who is the chair of the East African Community. And of course, Kenya and Tanzania, they have had rather frosty relations in the past, but again, you do not choose your neighbors. Kenya found itself next to Tanzania. You can choose your friends, but you cannot choose your neighbors. And therefore, whatever happens in Tanzania is of very key interest for Kenyans in terms of trade, in terms of political relations, in terms of relations within the East African community as a federation. So we are monitoring what is happening in Tanzania with a lot of interest.
Clearly, Lilian, Magufuli was on the road to reforming Tanzania. If you look at his bulldozer nature, as he was described, what does this mean, especially now that Tanzania was literally playing catch-up towards being a competitive nation?
By landmass, Tanzania is a very critical mass, occupies quite a significant mass within the East African region. And therefore, what has been seen as sort of the Cold War between Kenya and Tanzania largely has been the battle for dominance of the economic hegemony in this region. And Magufuli's leadership came 6 years ago with a new vigor, a new vibe when it comes to bulldozing his way, looked at as a very forceful individual. Remember, even when there's been conversations within East Africa and even trending on social media about what would Magufuli do. So his leadership style has been one looked at as possibly trying to jolt Tanzanians to be more proactive, to be more assertive in terms of stamping the authority within the region. And I think that has been seen in the way he has, driven his agenda when inspecting development projects, bulldozing lazy public servants who he thought were not delivering as expected. And so I think Tanzanians in a way, his style of leadership was a bit different, came out as a lot more abrasive, but also looked at by some people in other quarters as more dictatorial, as you believe. But again, he had the interests of the country at heart. As a nationalist, he's the one man who never traveled out of Tanzania for any good reason. If I can remember, in the 6 years that Magufuli has been president, I believe he first went to Rwanda, also made a brief tour of, came briefly to Nairobi for a trade summit, and that is pretty much it. So his vision was more inward looking, to jolt Tanzania, I believe, to somewhere. It's very unfortunate that his term has been cut short by the cruel hands of death.
Finally, Lilian, of course, right now, the opposition leaders have actually also mourned the death of President John Magufuli. But in the political dynamics, what will be taking shape? Of course, the constitution is clear that the vice president will assume office, but clearly, following the elections that recently happened, it leaves a lot to be desired.
It will be the next few days, it will be very interesting to watch political developments within Tanzania. Most of the opposition, at least the vocal critics within the opposition, are out of the country right now. Most of them are in the diaspora. Tundu Lissu is in Belgium. The chairman of ACT Wazalendo is also mainly based in Kenya, but it will be important, it will be interesting to watch the next few days of that political transition, how it is going to form. I do know the Tanzanian constitution provides that the vice president automatically takes over for the remainder of the term until the next election, which should be 2025. But we've had very strong voices from within the opposition. Tundu Lissu has been out most after the confirmation of this death, insisting that the country needs to go into another election. Remember, most of the opposition went into exile immediately after the elections. It will be interesting to see if they come back and put more pressure within the country for that to happen, or the constitution will override this quest and possibly have Samia sworn in as the next president of the Republic of Tanzania.
Thank you so much, Madam Lilian Odera, for... Well, we've been having that coverage, and we want to now bring in our very own foreign affairs editor from the print section of the newspaper, and that is Kennedy Muredi. Thank you for making time for us. And from a diplomatic standpoint, what are some of the inferences you can make following the announcement of the death of the president of Tanzania?
Well, first, I'd like to pass my message of condolences on behalf of myself and on behalf of the print section to Magufuli's family and to the people of Tanzania. Now, from a diplomatic point of view, of course, in the next couple of days, whether relations have been frosty or not, you see global leaders passing their messages of condolences to Tanzania and Tanzania's people. But it's what happens after Magufuli is buried that really matters, because the vice president who is set to take over has, for a majority of the time in Magufuli has been in office, she has been in the background, so her brand of politics is not really known to many. So I expect the region's leaders and the continent and even in the West, leaders will be watching keenly to see whether she will follow in Magufuli's footsteps or she'll seek to chart her own path.
Interesting analysis there. And looking at the, of course, very charged political environment that was during the elections, what do you make of how the opposition will handle this? Will they demand for fresh elections? Of course, the constitution is very clear.
Well, I would expect that Magufuli's exit from the political scene in Tanzania will embolden the likes of Tundu Lissu and Kabwe to push more for political inclusivity. You'll remember that during Magufuli's time, he has been accused of crushing dissent in the country. So it will be interesting to see how Tundu Lissu, for example, whether he will return to Tanzania from Belgium or he will stay in Belgium. It will be interesting because it's not really well known here exactly whether the incoming president will continue with with Magufuli's brand of politics, and if she does, how will she do it exactly the same way Magufuli did or not? But I would expect that the opposition will be more outspoken from now on. I would expect them to, those who are in Kenya, for example, and in Belgium, I would expect them to return to Tanzania, maybe even for the burial.
All right. And finally, and of course, the headlines will continue coming out of the country. There's still a lot of, I would say, uncertainty as to really the events that may have led to his demise. Perhaps from where you sit, Mr. Muredi, what will define the next coming days, especially across the international media and regional media as well?
Well, sadly, Magufuli will be remembered, especially by maybe the foreign media, by his handling of the coronavirus pandemic. But away in the pre-corona period, we see a different Magufuli, whose fight against laxity and laziness in government gained him a lot of political mileage in and outside Tanzania. And even you remember in his first term in office, the hashtag "What Magufuli would do" was really trending in East Africa, to an extent that even our Kenyan lawyer PLO Lumumba wrote a paper titled "The Magufulification of Africa," because he was seen as a new breath of life into, say, Tanzanian politics and East African politics, because he had taken the bull by the horns by trying to fight corruption in Tanzania and laxity in government and wastage. Right. You remember that he had really cut on foreign travel for ministers and CEOs of corporate agencies.
All right. Thank you so much, Kennedy Muredi, for your time. And of course, we continue with our extended coverage. Well, we also did speak to some of the business community in regards to what they make of the developments in Tanzania. And we have this coming up shortly. We did speak to a host of business leaders. But let's listen in on what one of the leaders had to say.
Condolences to our brothers in Tanzania for losing their beloved president. I think it came as a shocker to me. I only heard the news today morning. And I think what I remember the late president on is his zeal for his country, and you know, the drive to really have Tanzanians' interest or business interest first. So I think in the short term we expect a bit of shock as the country transitions, you know, to a different leader. So we would ideally see some slowdown, but I suspect that maybe in the short term, in the medium to long term, our trade relationships should remain stable. Of course, we've seen power play happen within the major party in Tanzania. So I think maybe it's still early to tell, and we are yet to see the kind of realignments that are going to take place. And I think based on history and based on the foundations of the founding fathers of Tanzania, we see Tanzania being a very united country. So ideally, I would not expect full-out conflict or anything. I think it's just a bit of realignment here and there. And I think business should be safe because we already have some institutions around the East African community. We have the parliament, etc. So I think we have been very solid partners, and I see that going on to the foreseeable future.
Well, still staying with the economic legacy, John Pombe Magufuli was nicknamed the bulldozer because of his way of doing things, as he was forcefully determined to get things done his way. Though it won him criticism and praise in equal measure, his bulldozing got things done at policy level and fiscal level. Days after entering office in 2015, he reduced the cabinet size from 30 ministers to 19 to help reduce costs. KTN's Brenda Kirubo with this detailed report on his austerity measures, infrastructure projects and aggressive foreign policies.
John Pombe Magufuli was elected a lawmaker for the ruling Chama cha Mapinduzi party in 1995 and served in various ministries including Lands and Human Settlement, Livestock and Fisheries and the Ministry of Works. He forged a reputation as an incorruptible leader. Magufuli cancelled a lavish Independence Day ceremony days after coming to power in 2015. He directed the funds be used in road construction in the capital, Dar es Salaam. Magufuli also imposed austerity measures to curb government spending, such as unnecessary foreign travel and using cheaper vehicles by government officials. Perhaps the most radical reforms was amending the laws governing the award of mining contracts. The mining sector's contribution to GDP, or the total number of goods and services produced in the country, is estimated at 3.5%. The new legislation removed the rights of mining companies to resort to international arbitration. In fact, the government set about recouping taxes from multinationals. The most memorable case was a tax dispute with global miner Acacia Mining, which was accused of having significantly undervalued its gold production for years. With international mediation no longer an option, Acacia reached a settlement deal that will see it pay $300 million in 3 tranches of $100 million each.
Indeed, when Magufuli came to presidency, he had the narrative that foreign investors took advantage of Tanzania. And he felt that foreign investors were not paying their fair share of taxes. And he made this one of the core pillars of his presidency. So what we saw with Acacia Mining, for example, where he slapped on them a 190 billion tax bill, for him, it was a way of returning to Tanzania back the wealth that has been drawn from it.
In 2016, the Tanzanian government under President John Pombe Magufuli initiated a new drive to revive the national carrier, Air Tanzania. The government purchased 6 new aircrafts between 2016 and 2018. Magufuli also pushed for infrastructure development to boost economic activity in the country. Projects include the expansion of Terminal 3 of Julius Nyerere International Airport, construction of Tanzania's standard gauge railway, and expansion of Port of Dar es Salaam. The aggressive infrastructure development has driven economic growth at close to 7% a year for the past decade, and Tanzania has crossed the World Bank's threshold to become a middle-income country with an average income of more than $1,036 a year. Magufuli said they achieved the goal 5 years ahead of plan, but the International Monetary Fund has raised doubts pointing to serious weaknesses in the growth data.
He really believed that if they're not going to get funding from foreign investors and foreign countries, then Tanzania has to raise the taxes domestically and locally. And I think that's why he had that Tanzania first economic nationalism that seemed to be at the cornerstone of his presidency.
The Bank of Tanzania predicts the economy will expand by 6% or more this year, from an estimated 5.5% last year. The central bank says the figure is linked to global economic recovery and faster private sector credit growth in the first half. Unlike other countries in the world, Tanzania did not shut down its economy at the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, with President John Pombe Magufuli insisting the crisis was not serious enough to warrant a shutdown. Brenda Kirubo, KTN News.
We continue mourning the passing on of Tanzania's 5th president, John Pombe Magufuli.